Hi, my name is Jack Rackham, and today I'm going to show you the family tree of the Sapa Incas of the Inca Empire. We'll be using another chart that was created by one of you and posted onto the Useful Charts subreddit. You all have been contributing some truly impressive charts, from the obscure to the epic to the silly, and I can't wait to see who'll win the contest to have their chart printed and sold by Useful Charts. Now, the Inca Empire is a really interesting civilization. My inclination is to liken it to the Romans, but that might not be cutting it. After all, when the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, they remarked how the capital city of Cusco was a marvel to rival any in Renaissance Europe. And yet, everything in the empire was built without iron or steel. Their granaries were filled without a single animal to plow the fields. They expanded across half a continent without the wheel and administered their empire without writing. That is bananas. Civilizations along the western coast of South America date back at least to Norte Chico between the 30th and 18th centuries BCE, or about the same time as dynastic Egypt. In fact, the Andes are considered the cradle to one of 5 so-called pristine civilizations that arose completely independently from one another. The others being the Fertile Crescent, including both Mesopotamia and Egypt, the Indo-Gangetic Plain in North India, the North China Plain, and the Mesoamerican Gulf Coast. We obviously don't have time to go into the complete origins of the Inca civilization, but I will point out the Nazca, an Andean civilization that thrived between the years 100 and 800 CE, who of course built the famous and mysterious Nazca lines, artwork so large it's impossible to see the entire image except from the air. Just as impressive, their civilization created underground aqueducts that are still being used for irrigation today. I'll also mention the Tiwanaku Empire, which fell around the year 1000 CE, allowing for the rise of the Kingdom of Cusco and all these other kingdoms you can see on the chart. The origin story the Inca had for themselves was a little different. It began with the god Viracocha, who created the sun, the moon, the stars, even time itself when he ordered the sun to move across the sky. He then created mankind and wandered around the earth teaching them how to build civilization. The story goes he wiped out the people around Lake Titicaca with a flood, save for 2. Manco Capac, son of the sun, and his wife, Mama Oclio, and they founded the Inca civilization. In another story, Manco Capac and all his siblings, including his wife, unite their people and take over the Cusco Valley, guided by divine providence. In any case, the first king, Manco Capac, is a legendary figure, so historically speaking, we can't say much about him for certain, other than the time period he supposedly lived in coincided with the beginnings of the Inca civilization. Or perhaps more accurately, the Cusqueño civilization, as it was known originally as the Kingdom of Cusco. Its territory was very small, though, neighbored by other tribes and kingdoms near Lake Titicaca like the Colla and Lupaca. Manco Capac's son, Sinchi was the first to take on the Mascapachia, or imperial crown, made of gold with fringes of red wool and a tuft of feathers from the sacred Caracara bird. You'll notice, just like his father, he was married to a woman called Coya Mama. Well, Coya is just a title similar to queen consort or princess. And Mama, well, it actually means mother. Mama Kilia, wife of the sun god, means mother moon. Mama Oclio means mother of fertility. So these women's roles as mother figures was significant to the Inca. Sinchi was followed by a son named Lioque Yupanqui. And here you might notice another interesting naming convention. So far, no king has had the same first or last name as his father, because the Inca traditionally didn't use family names. If you survived infancy, you were given a name at 2 to 3 years old, then given a new name after reaching puberty, and if you were a noble, you might even receive more names throughout your life. Moving on, we have Maita Capac and Capac Yupanqui, who both did some conquering. The latter is said to be the first to take the Kingdom of Cusco outside of the Cusco Valley for the first time. And now when we get to Inca Roca, This may look like just another clean and easy father-son transition, but it's actually the beginning of a new dynasty. Capac Yupanqui's son, Quispe Yupanqui, was the heir apparent, and he and Inca Roca were half-brothers. Well, one day, Inca Roca rebelled and killed Quispe Yupanqui with the help of his mother's family. Now, the reason this is considered a new dynasty is a little complicated, and has to do with the concept of moiety, which was practiced in many different parts of the world in different ways, and if I'm being completely honest, I still struggle to wrap my head around it. But in most places that used this system, people in your moiety were like siblings to you. Even if you were strangers, you were socially obligated to help one another in certain ways. But because they were like siblings, that meant you had to marry someone from the other moiety. So in short, the previous kings had all been from the same moiety, probably because they were marrying their relatives. And because Inca Roca had a different mother, he and his descendants were from the other moiety. He was succeeded by his son Yahuarhuacac, and then by Viracocha, who was named after the creator god. He may or may not have been Yahuarhuacac's biological son, but he was at the very least treated as if he were, and was part of the same moiety. Next is perhaps one of the most famous Inca emperors, and the first who can appropriately be called an emperor, Pachacuti. His story begins during the reign of his father, when Viracocha went to war with a people called the Chanca. The war ultimately turned bad for the Inca, and the Chanca came to attack Cusco. Viracocha and the crown prince fled the city, but one of his sons stayed to fight, and he defended the city so successfully that legends arose of how the stones of Cusco rose up to his aid, and his name became synonymous with Cataclysm, the Earth Shaker, one who reforms the world, Pachacuti. For me personally, I will forever associate the name Pachacuti with horrible histories. Even now, it's stuck in my head. After the city was saved, Pachacuti humbly allowed his father the important victory ritual of wiping his feet on his defeated foes. But Viracocha said that the crown prince should be the one to do it, and that really upset Pachacuti. The crown prince tried to have him assassinated, but failed. He was sent into exile, and so was Viracocha. And Pachacuti expanded the empire dramatically, conquering many of these other kingdoms. The Timor, for instance, were before this point the greatest power in the area, and in only a matter of years they found themselves absolutely dwarfed by Pachacuti's Incan empire. And so, if Pachacuti suddenly went from ruling a small area of land that he could oversee very personally to a sprawling empire, how did he do it without writing? Well, first of all, he divided the empire into 4 provinces, each ruled by a governor. The Inca called their empire Tawantinsuyu, meaning 4 provinces, so it's safe to say this was a defining feature. And while Pachacuti didn't have writing, he did have the quipu. Quipus aren't a writing system in the traditional sense. First of all, there are no symbols. Instead of carving in clay or drawing on paper, quipus used knots tied on strings to carry important information, like how much a family owed in taxes that year. But they're also unique in that the information they carry isn't phonetic in nature. Kind of like numerals or musical notation, the information is there, and there are words to describe it, but nothing about these tells you how to say them. We know quipus were used to transcribe numbers, but there's a lot about them we still don't know. For instance, if any meaning was carried by the colors of the quipu's strings. Some scholars have reasoned that everything about them was non-phonetic, while some say there may actually have been phonetic information contained in them after all that we just haven't decoded. After Pachacuti's death, the empire expanded even more under his son Tupac Inca, a capable general who led the Incan army during his father's reign. According to legend, he once led an expedition into the Pacific in search of new lands to conquer, personally visiting a number of islands. Historians are skeptical this ever took place, though a few posit he might have made it as far as the Galapagos or Easter Island. And just before he died, Europeans took their first steps in the Americas. Huayna Capac enjoyed the Inca Empire's zenith. He made some small territorial gains, absorbing Quito in modern-day Ecuador into the empire by marrying Pacha Duchicela, and he appeared to fall in love with the city. Quito became a sort of second capital for the empire. He built a summer palace, massive temples, and an astronomical observatory in the area. Once again, a huge feat without writing, owing in part to the Incas' unique system of taxation. In addition to traditional monetary taxes, the Incas also required mandatory public service. So, in seasons when families weren't tending to their fields, they would be constructing public works, such as the empire's massive road network, or serving in the military. Huayna Capac died just before the Spanish arrived, because before a single conquistador came to Cusco, the roads had carried something even deadlier: European diseases. The emperor and his designated heir both succumbed to fever. The result was an empire divided between two sons, Atahualpa in Quito and Huáscar in Cusco. Soon there was civil war. Huáscar had the early upper hand, but Atahualpa escaped and went on to be the ultimate victor. And it was in the aftermath of disease and civil war that the conquistadors arrived. Though Francisco Pizarro came with only 168 men, 27 horses, and a cannon, Inca soldiers simply weren't equipped to pierce Spanish armor and didn't have strategies to deploy against cavalry. Pizarro captured Atahualpa, and Atahualpa offered to fill the room he was held in with gold to pay for his freedom. But after the payment was made, the Spanish held a trial and sentenced Atahualpa to be burned alive. Among his crimes, squandering public retinues. His sentence was only alleviated to death by strangulation in exchange for converting to Christianity. One of Huayna Capac's 50 illegitimate sons, Tupac Hualpa, was installed as a puppet ruler by the Spanish in 1533, and with great fanfare to assure the people that they were still ruled by an Inca, but he died in mere months. So instead, Manco Inca was crowned, but mistreated by the Pizarro brothers and attempted to escape in 1535. He was taken prisoner and told he'd be released if he would go fetch a golden statue of his father for the Spanish to melt down. You can imagine why he might have been reluctant. He escaped again, and this time brought an army. He laid siege to Cusco for a year, but couldn't hold the city. Instead, he retreated north to the jungle and founded a government in exile, or a rump state, in Vilcabamba. In Cusco, Paulio Inca was installed as the next puppet ruler, and would sit on the throne for 13 years. He died peacefully, after which point no more Sapa Incas were appointed, as the Inca Empire was already being governed under Spanish viceroyalties. Spanish conquistadors Pizarro and Almagro found themselves in a civil war of sorts, but that would bring no relief to the neo-Inca state of Vilcabamba. Their capital was sacked in 1539, and although the Spanish weren't able to lay hands on Manco Inca, they brutally murdered his wife. Manco Inca tried to use the strife among the Spanish to his advantage by taking in some of Almagro's supporters who had lost a battle to the Pizarro brothers in which Almagro himself was killed, but those men would assassinate the Sapa Inca 2 years later. Sayri Tupac, his successor, was a child at the time. He was nearly ready to accept an offer from the Spanish in 1549 to accept lands, houses, and a pension in Cusco, but at that time, the puppet ruler Paulio Inca died, which was taken either as a bad omen or a sign of lingering Spanish treachery. But in 1556, he was finally cajoled out of Vilcabamba. He renounced his claim to Cusco, gave up the royal red fringe, and lived in luxury a day's journey outside of Cusco, where the Spanish had control. He died suddenly in 1561. Titu Cusi, who took control of Vilcabamba after this, suspected Sayri Tupac had been poisoned. And yet, he later agreed to a similar arrangement to live off a large pension in Spanish lands. Fortunately, at the very least, he gave his account of the conquest of Peru to a Spanish missionary, providing a valuable document for historians seeking an Inca perspective, or at least something close to it. Yet somehow, when he died, the Spanish remained unaware, even when Tupac Amaru ascended to the throne. Thus, when they sent ambassadors, as they had been doing regularly while Titu Cusi was alive, the two men were killed by an Inca captain. That was the casus belli the Spanish needed to sweep in and finally conquer the last remnants of the Inca Empire. But when they arrived, the city was deserted, the Sapa Inca was gone, and the Inca Empire was no more. Now, a couple of interesting connections before we go. Tupac Hualpa's daughter married a conquistador, and their son became one of the very first authors from the Americas to find success in the Old World. He moved to Spain as a young man and worked to chronicle Inca history, as well as the history of Florida. He presented the Inca as benevolent rulers and their people as well-fed and happy before the Spanish came. He also provided some valuable insights into the tax and labor system called the Mita that I mentioned earlier. Sayri Tupac's daughter also married a Spanish man. However, where the circumstances surrounding Palya-Chimpuoclio's marriage leave some room for doubt, it's clear that Beatriz Claracoya was given to this man as a reward for his feats in battle against the Inca, and he later became a governor of Chile. It's a similar story for Quispe Sisa, who was taken as a prize by Francisco Pizarro and brought back to Spain. But many generations later, the descendants of Inca royalty would rule some of its land again. In the 20th century, her line led to 2 presidents of Bolivia, not to mention a president of the Dominican Republic. And finally, though Sapa Inca Tupac Amaru escaped Vilcabamba on that fateful day in 1572, he was later caught and executed. But his daughter survived. Generations later, her descendant Jose Gabriel Condorcanqui took on the name Tupac Amaru II when he led a revolt against the Spanish and a revival of Inca identity. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have been driven crazy by the fact that this is the 10th time I've said the name Tupac, and I have yet to make any reference to one of the best-selling musical artists and one of the most influential rappers of all time, Tupac Shakur. Well, I've been saving that reference, because you may or may not know this, but his middle name was Amaru, and he was named after this man. And that's that, the history of the Incan Empire. Once again, if you'd like to see dozens of other great charts like this one, you can find them on our subreddit, r/usefulcharts. And of course, we have an excellent selection for sale at usefulcharts.com. One of them could even be yours. The competition is still running until June 30th. Thank you for watching.